All right, my friends, let's go ahead and move on to the best movies of 2024. So, for those that don't know, I have seen more newly released theatrical movies this year than I think I've have in any other year previously. I've seen a lot of films and also TV shows. So much so that I kind of like neglected video games this year. Was not able to check out a lot of big games, but I am glad I was able to focus on so many movies and so many shows because I was able to see, thankfully, a lot of great stuff. A lot of bad stuff. A lot of terrible movies this year. You know, don't worry. We'll get to those very, very soon. But I want to concentrate on the best. I want to concentrate on the good. And I have put together in my opinion, what I think is a really nice top 10 list. I got a nice variety of different films, different genres. It's not just, specific genre or anything like that, although I do want to do lists like that in the near future. But, I think I have a very diverse list. And of course, I have many honorable mentions. And so, before I go ahead and just, jump into my top 10, I do want to mention at least 10 honorable mentions that I have, maybe 10 plus. And of course, I have not had the opportunity to see, I've seen a lot, but I haven't had the opportunity to see everything this year. There are some films that I've missed, but I will make a concerted effort to check those out throughout the month of January and February, leading up to all those various award shows and stuff. But I have seen quite a few. But starting off with my 10 honorable mentions. These aren't really in any specific order. Maybe like a couple almost made the top 10 and were in the top 10 for quite some time. But just starting off with some films that I thought were great and I recommend to a lot of people. And the first movie I want to mention of my honorable mentions is A Quiet Place Day One, which is directed by Michael Sarnowski, and it's the first spinoff, I believe, of the Quiet Place franchise. Now, I've really enjoyed the first two Quiet Place movies directed by John Krasinski. Quiet Place Part 1, Quiet Place Part 2. I'm a big, creature feature fan. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Like, hey, give me a survivalist setting, put a monster in there, boom, I'm great. Let's go ahead and see how that's going to work. And the Quiet Place franchise, I think, has been just one of the best horror franchise, certainly modern horror franchises out right now. It's just been really entertaining. I've loved the focus on the family. I think the performances are great. The world is interesting. Like these creatures that have super sensitive hearing and that they can track you down and kill you very violently. And we've mostly followed this family who have been able to survive because they know sign language and they're able to stay very quiet. And, we've seen tragedy befall this family in part 1 and obviously in part 2, but it's just been great, and to me, both movies are kind of head and shoulders right next to each other. It's like the sequel kind of expands the world as it should. Just we're not doing the same things. We're going out to different places. But the original movie is wonderful. And A Quiet Place Day One, as the subtitle implies, this is day one of the alien invasion. When these creatures, sometimes referred to as death angels by members of the fan base, crash to Earth after they're being attached to this meteor and just run rampant and just decimate the human population. And this movie, unlike the first two films, just kind of took place in rural upstate New York, I believe. This one takes place mostly in New York City. And we're not following John Krasinski and his family as we did in those two movies. In this one, we're following completely new characters, specifically Lupita Nyong'o, who plays this terminally ill woman who has the early stages of cancer. And then Joseph Quinn, he's also in the film, is one of the companions to Lupita Nyong'o's character. And there's some other people that pop up throughout the movie as well. Alex Wolff is in this movie. Jimon Hunsu reprises his role from A Quiet Place Part 2. And, much like the original two creature features, the original two films in this franchise, it's just incredibly well directed. Michael Sarnowski, this is the guy that did Pig from a few years ago, which I highly recommend. Kind of came out during the pandemic, so it was kind of, it wasn't seen by a lot of people. But even though the trailer for that movie made it look like a horror film, it really wasn't that. It was that movie starring Nicolas Cage. and about this guy living in the woods of this truffle pig, and the truffle pig is kidnapped. People thought like, oh, it's gonna be like a horror version of John Wick. It's not that. It's more of a movie about how we deal with grief and how people deal with it, better or worse than others. And I just thought that movie was great. I thought it was very beautiful looking, very atmospheric. I was like, oh, this guy should do a horror film. So when he was picked to do a Quiet Place spinoff, I thought, oh, that's a natural choice. And he does a great job. Like, this movie is very well directed. The cinematography is great. I like the new setting of taking place in the city, so we're not just seeing the same kind of areas again. And Lupita Nyong'o, as she is in many things, she's wonderful in the film. Joseph Quinn, it's great to see him, outside of Stranger Things, which he was great in, obviously. I mean, that's how I was introduced to him. I think a lot of people were. But, playing a very different, type of character. I think he does a great job. And that cat, Frodo the cat. Everyone loves Frodo the cat in that movie. I really enjoyed this film. If you like the previous two Quiet Places, I think you're going to really like this movie too. But moving on from A Quiet Place Day One, the other honorable mention I want to mention, of course, is Challengers, which is the latest film. It's a romantic sports drama directed by Luca Guadagnino, and it focuses on this love triangle that kind of takes place over years. And it's kind of told in a non-linear fashion. And we follow this former tennis star who is injured. Now she's a coach, played by Zendaya. And her husband, who she's been in a relationship with for like 13 years. And he's like this tennis champion, but he's kind of on the way out. He has, confidence issues and things. But then also their friend and, Zendaya's former ex-boyfriend, who's this low circuit tennis player who kind of gets into the mix again with them and complicates things. And again, the ex-boyfriend's played by Josh O'Connor, and the husband's played by Mike Feist. And this is just a really cool, sexy drama. These characters just lusting after each other, having the dynamics between them change throughout the entire movie. And again, O'Connor and Feist, I think they do a great job in the film, but this is very much Zendaya's movie. Like, I've always liked Zendaya. She's been, really good in a lot of the things that I've seen her in. But this is the first time where I think we really get to see her acting chops, her play a very different type of character. And I think she does a great job of just dominating the screen with her presence. I mean, she has that sex appeal, which you had these two guys just lusting after her throughout the entire film. But she does a great job just holding her own throughout this entire movie. And it makes me excited to see her in more projects. A lot of the tennis stuff is well done. There is some like weird cinematography where we kind of follow it from the perspective of the ball, which is like, I didn't really need that. It's a little too much for me. But a lot of the other moments of the tennis stuff, that's very good. Like the chemistry between the three leads, it all works between them. It's also very smartly written. They have some great dialogue in the movie. So Challengers, definitely one of my favorite films of the movie. Not my top 10, but an honorable mention. Another film I want to mention, of course, is Cuckoo, which is directed by Tillman Singer, a German director, and stars Hunter Schafer and my secret boyfriend, Dan Stevens. And the film follows this teenager, played by Schafer, who moves to the German Alps with her family. Because, they're trying to open up this new hotel there and they've been requested. But as they're there in this small, isolated town, these weird, strange occurrences just start happening. And the person at the center of all of this seems to be the person in charge, which is Dan Stevens' character, and has embroiled Schaefer's family in this sinister plot. Like, a lot of this movie reminds me of kind of like giallo films, giallo horror movies. It has kind of those sensibilities and aesthetics. You have some really creepy, well-done scares. Not like a lot of jump scares or anything like that, but stuff that's super atmospheric and very weird. And just Dan Stevens being a fucking weirdo. Dan Stevens, after Downton Abbey, he could have easily just been, I'm going to be the handsome leading man and everything. I'm going to be the handsome leading man in this romantic film or in this drama. And he's dabbled in that a little bit, like Beauty and the Beast, of course. But really ever since then, like with The Guest and all these other movies, he's just kind of played like a psychopath, and he's so great at it. And that's on full display here. Yeah, Cuckoo is a really cool horror thriller that I recommend. Great performance by Hunter Schafer. And if you just want to see Dan Stevens just be a weirdo, got to check this one out. But moving on from Cuckoo, another honorable mention I have is Deadpool and Wolverine. It's the one lone MCU movie that came out this year. And, you know, the MCU, it's kind of been on a bit of a downward spiral. They've had some of their successes, most certainly. Things like, you know, Spider-Man No Way Home, of course. But then we've definitely had some flops, definitely had some disappointments, you know, over these last couple years. You know, whether it be things like with the Marvels or, you know, maybe, I mean, pick, you know, whatever TV show disappointed you. And Deadpool and Wolverine, you go into that movie, you go in this film, and they present that kind of opinion. That general feeling is throughout the film. Like one of the funniest lines in the movie, where of course, you know, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, you know, joins Deadpool, is welcomed into the MCU with both of them, and Deadpool turns to him at one point and says, "Hey, welcome to the MCU. You're kind of entering a bit of a low point." And it's true. It's very funny, but. Listen, I've been a big fan of the Deadpool films. The first one is still my favorite. To me, Deadpool was a shot in the arm to the superhero subgenre. You know, we need that. We can't just get the same type of superhero films time and time again. You need one that is going to make fun of superhero movies, and Deadpool is the perfect character to do so. And Ryan Reynolds is the perfect Deadpool. He was born to play. Matter of fact, in the comics, Deadpool is he has been quoted as saying, because someone's asking, what do you look like? He's like, I'm a cross between Ryan Reynolds and a Shar-Pei. And it's like, it's true. And he's wonderful as the character, continues to be wonderful in this movie. And unlike, you know, the first two, which are very much entrenched in the Fox universe, this one finally crosses over to the MCU. So yes, you have all the fun references and him, you know, making fun of Disney and the MCU. You know, it's from its highs into its lows. Like all that's in the film, you know, and you have your action. There's some good action sequences in there. Some great music. It has a wonderful soundtrack. A dance number that's absolutely killer in the film. But the thing to me that works best about the movie, honestly, that I enjoyed the most is the chemistry between Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. They are fantastic together. I love their whole crazy ass buddy road trip, you know, going from point A to point B to point C to try to save their universe, the Fox universe, you know, if you will, or whatever's that's left of it at this point. And, you have some other supporting performances, and you get some big surprises, some cool cameos, you know, which, you know, if you've seen the film, you obviously, you know who they are. And those are handled, I think, very well for the most part. But the thing is, the thing that makes the movie work as well as it does is the relationship and the dynamic between Ryan Reynolds and Jackman. Jackman, it's like him coming back was like, okay, I think it's going to be cool. And he comes back in the suit, the classic Wolverine blue and yellow suit, and he looks fucking great. And it makes you ask, why didn't they do that, you know, 25 years ago? But, you know, Jackman has played this character longer, like a superhero character longer than anyone else has in more movies. Like you can argue like, oh, Michael Keaton played 89. Yes, but he's only played Batman 3 times. Hugh Jackman's played Wolverine like how many times? At least a dozen? 11? Who knows at this point? Over a dozen times. And he just feels so comfortable as this character. And he doesn't like phone in a performance either. You know, especially after Logan, which was so great. It was such a wonderful send-off to that character. And this film, you know, they acknowledge that send-off in a very funny way, in a great way, in a respectful way. But like seeing him here again, it's like, yeah, he can keep playing this character until he's 90, which is another joke from the film because he's just so good, and he most likely will, or he'll continue to play him at least for several more movies, and I welcome that. I can't wait to see Deadpool and Wolverine interact more, and I mean how this movie ends, they clearly set that up for more interactions with the MCU and things. So what will be the state of the MCU in the next few years? Who knows? You know, there's some films I'm excited for, some I'm not, some I'm just kind of confused by, but I did appreciate how fun this movie was. Has its flaws, forgettable villain, you know, the story is like some stuff that just doesn't make any sense. But the moment-to-moment gags, the chemistry between Reynolds and Jackman, some supporting performances of some fun characters in the past, I think really hold this movie together. It's not my favorite of the franchise. The first one is, but I really like this, and I do think it's better than Deadpool 2. Moving on to my next honorable mention is Dune Part 2. Now, I'll admit, I wasn't over the moon about the first Dune, Denis Villeneuve's Dune from a couple years ago. While I appreciate the technical aspects, it looked beautiful. I like just the aesthetics of it. The score was great. You know, the costumes, like all the technical aspects of that original movie, I thought were really cool. I like the world. I like the ideas of the world and how like this society, this universe functions. Like my biggest criticism, I think, Dune in general is I just feel like some of these characters are really underwritten. Like they just don't have a lot of punch to them. They're just not very interesting, you know. And even though seemingly like everything that happens like on Arrakis, on Dune, between these various powerful families, I just never felt too invested in the story. Dune Part 2, I think, does a better job of fleshing these characters out, their motivations and things. Not as much as I would have liked, but I think it's a more entertaining movie than the first one. And it is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. Score is great. Costumes across the board. Again, all the technical aspects, all the aesthetics are wonderful. It's a technical marvel. It's a technical masterpiece. I still feel like some of the characters are underwritten, but they do more of some of the characters, either new people or characters that we saw before. Javier Bardem is Stilgar. He's such a hoot in this movie. He's so funny. You know, just going off, talking about the Messiah. We have Paul saying, like, I'm not the Messiah. It's like, that's exactly what the Messiah would say. He's like, oh my God, he's so humble. He's so humble, the Messiah. And he's great in the movie. I mean, he became a goddamn meme. He gifts everywhere, so he's a great character. And a new character that I really came to enjoy, even though they're kind of introduced like an hour into the movie, and then sadly, like, I don't think we're going to see them anymore. But Austin Butler as Fade Rotha. Like, I was not a big fan of the Harkonnens in the first movie. They were just the most generic, one-dimensional bad guys ever. They're evil black outfits, bald. They were just yellow, like Dave Bautista. That's his character. Like, Uncle, why do they defy us? Like, that's all he does, you know. And, you know, Stellan Skarsgård, who's a great actor, he's just floating around being fat. And he's like, oh, the Emperor. That's his thing. But Austin Butler as Fade Rother added a little more dimension to the Harkins. One, he's just interesting. Like, his performance is crazy. He's weird. He has so much charisma. I like that he kind of emulates Stellan Skarsgård's accent as well. Like, he was a great antagonist in the movie. I wish he was honestly in it more. Because I feel like he comes in like almost too late, but every scene he's in, he dominates. And also there's some fantastic action in the movie too, like the choreography, the big set pieces, the fighting in the desert, the final, you know, battle at the end with the, you know, silver sci-fi pyramid, and all that, the duel between Fade Rotha and Paul Atreides. Muad'Dib is that guy. Timothée Chalamet's character has like 15 goddamn names in the movie. My favorite is Muad'Dib, little desert mouse. Like, that duel was handled very, very well. So there's a lot to appreciate about this film. I'm not as in love with it as many people are. Some people are saying like, hey, this is like on their best of list. This is like their number one movie. I can understand why. I just want a little bit more from the characters, but I do think it's a nice improvement over Dune Part 1, and that's why I want to acknowledge it in my honorable mentions. But moving on, speaking of deserts, my next honorable mention is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Of course, George Miller returns to direct this film. He's helmed every chapter of the Mad Max saga before this movie. And this is a prequel sequel to Mad Max Fury Road. Instead of focusing on Mad Max Rokitansky, you know, played by Mel Gibson, and obviously later on by Tom Hardy, we're focusing on Imperator Furiosa, who, you know, was obviously played by Charlize Theron in Fury Road. Here, being played by Anya Taylor-Joy and another actress as well, younger actress. And I outside of some technical stuff that kind of bothered me and some green screen, like there's a lot of green screen in this movie, sadly, because I think the pandemic affected the filming of this movie, and I think something else as well. I think there was like some type of geographical environmental hazard that they couldn't film in the usual spot that they did for the other Mad Max films. So this is a little more CGI, a little more green screen heavy than the previous Mad Max. I mean, I'm always that guy that I prefer the look of like the OG trilogy, especially Road Warrior, where they were actually doing all those stunts themselves, and they like were filming like on location. It just felt real. Like I like Fury Road, but there's CGI in there. There's some environments where clearly they're not shooting on location. Here it is like, all right, you're using a lot more green screen. But despite that criticism, this movie does a lot right. Like there is a lot of other things that I think like look really cool on a technical level. The designs of the costumes, the vehicles, the action is fun. But you have some really good performances in this movie. I think Anya Taylor-Joy does a great job. But the person that steals this film, especially every scene they're in, is Chris Hemsworth as Warlord Dementus, who is just, he's not like, what I love about him is, unlike, a lot of the villains that we've seen in the past, whether it be Toe Cutter or, Lord Humongous, Anti-Entity, or a Morton Joe who appears in this film. It's a younger version of him, sadly not played by Hugh Keays-Byrne, who passed away before the making of the movie. But he's kind of like a schemer. He's trying to figure out his place in this world, and he knows he's going up against someone who's more powerful than him, but he's just trying to do all these underhanded things, manipulate the power structures that be to benefit him. And that makes him memorable. He's a very charismatic character. And I just found him very charming. Like Chris Hemsworth, of course, is, I think, best known for playing Thor, but he's done a great job of playing villains when he has. I really liked him in the that one movie he did a few years ago, directed by Drew Goddard, where he played this cult leader. Thought he was like the best thing about that movie, in my opinion. And here that's on full display again, his nefariousness, how underhanded he is. I really liked him. But yeah, a really great entry in the Mad Max series. Sadly, it looks like it's going to be the last one because this was a huge commercial disaster. But I do encourage people to check it out. If you like the Furiosa character, if you like this world, minus some of maybe the CGI aesthetic stuff, I still think you're going to get a lot of this, especially with Chris Hemsworth as Lord Dementus, who's one of the best villains in the franchise by far. And moving on to my next honorable mention, and this is crazy that I never thought I would have had this on my best of the years list, at least honorable mentions. And the next one I want to bring up is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Yes, the third chapter in the Sonic film series. Of course, Jeff Fowler returns to direct, and this is the continued adventures of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Team Sonic, and they have to deal with a new threat, Shadow the Hedgehog, along with Dr. Robotnik, two Dr. Robotniks. I vote Dr. Robotnik and Joe Robotnik, played by Jim Carrey, both played by Jim Carrey. And this movie's really fun. At this point, you can tell that the filmmakers, the writers, everyone, they know what they're doing now. Like, I think it's very smart that they're focusing more on the actual video game characters, more on like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, obviously. A lot of the human characters have been kind of pushed in the background, the tertiary characters. I think they're probably used the best here than they've ever been. And, of course, Jim Carrey's full front and center in this movie. And he is at an 11 in this film, like so many of his scenes. And I love how just over time, from the first film to the second film to this one, he's just grown more and more into the classic Robotnik that we see from the games. Like when the second movie, he had the bald head, he had the mustache, he was even wackier. Here he's fatter and even crazier. And like, having him play off himself. Who would have thought? Jim Carrey has great chemistry of Jim Carrey, but how they did all those scenes with the two of them was great. Some of the best comedic moments are with those two Robotniks in Sonic 3. But they also gave Robotnik an arc in this movie as well. Where before he was just very much like, and again, straightforward bad guy, very funny. But here he kind of has an arc and he changes. He goes through a change, a metamorphosis, if you will, throughout this movie. But the other standout is Shadow the Hedgehog, who, listen, My relationship with Sonic has always been complicated. Like, I appreciate like the world and the aesthetic and the adaptations. Not a fan of the games, but I've always liked Shadow. You know, he always reminded me of Vegeta, like from Dragon Ball Z, where, you know, Sonic's very much Goku. But Keanu Reeves is perfectly cast as Shadow. They give him a surprisingly endearing and tragic backstory that works. It's a really solid motivation for the things that he does in this film. And lastly, you have some great action scenes in this movie. The action, it's so funny because we did like a watch through of the first one after having seen Sonic 3, and it makes like the first one's action scenes like look quaint because they get really big with these ones, and all of them look really good. It reminds me very, bringing up Dragon Ball again, but they remind me of the scenes from the fight scenes in Dragon Ball Z, like between Goku and Vegeta, like fighting each other in the Canyon in the Saiyan arc, or like later on the Buu arc when they go Super Saiyan. It just worked really well, and I'm as surprised as you guys are that I have this on my best of, or at the very least on my honorable mentions. But yeah, Sonic Hedgehog 3, chat, it's the best of the franchise, and it's one of the best, if not the best, cinematic video game adaptation that we've ever gotten, at least so far. Pretty impressive. And moving on, I have 3 more honorable mentions, chat. 3 more. And these are probably on my top 10 list for a while. The next one I want to bring up is a film that I honestly had so many misgivings about. And I thought was like, oh, give me a break. Who needs this movie? The last thing we need is another entry in this franchise. And that movie is The First Omen, the prequel sequel to the original 1976 Omen. I think this is the 6th film in the Omen franchise. And listen, as you guys know, if you guys, are horror fans, once you're like that deep into a long-running horror franchise and they start doing prequels, you're like, all right, just get rid of this. It's over. It's going to be terrible. There are so many awful, infamous horror prequels. Everything from The Exorcist, the beginning, to any of the Texas Chainsaw prequels. There's just so many bad ones out there. But this one bucks that. It bucks the trend. It actually delivers the second best entry in the series. It's directed by Arkasha Stevenson, who I'm relatively unfamiliar with, but her directing, along with stars Nell Tiger Free and Ralph Ineson and Bill Nye, they put together like a really great movie. It's smartly written. It's scary. There's some really cool practical and technical aspects of this film that just make you so squeamish. There's one scene, I want to go into spoilers or anything. There is a birthing scene that's done very well, and it's great. So if you like body horror, I think you'll like this quite a bit. But it's very respectful to the original Omen as well. Like you can watch this movie and the original Omen, and you can have like a nice story. Sadly, this one didn't perform very well commercially, but again, like so many other people, I had misgivings about this movie. I didn't care for the trailers, but it's really, really good. Like this was on my best of list for a very long time. It just eventually got kicked off, but yeah, it makes me very interested to see what Arkasha Stevenson is going to do in the future. And yeah, Nell Tiger Free, she just gives such a great performance. In this, it has a great setting too, where it's set in the 70s, and and dealing with all the socio-political upheaval going on during this time period. It's just very smart. It's very, very smart. A great period piece too. And moving on to the penultimate honorable mention. Another movie that I had so many misgivings about because I thought the trailers looked awful. And that movie is Transformers 1. Transformers 1, which is directed by Josh Cooley, who directed Toy Story 4 before this one and did a fantastic job with that. This film, it focuses on mostly the origins, the early relationship between Orion Pax and D16, who would later become Optimus Prime and Megatron, respectively, taking place on their home planet of Cybertron, where they have like this very rigid caste system in place. And both Orion and D16, they want to better themselves. They want to get out of their positions of lowly miners, basically slave labor, basically indentured servants, so they can obtain the ability to transform and, you know, be in the upper echelons of Cybertronian society. D16 and Orion, they, along with their friends, they come to learn of this huge conspiracy that has affected their entire planet, and they're, you know, trying to fix that and expose this person responsible for putting this horribly abusive system in power. And yeah, it's just simply the best Transformers movie ever made. And, you know, I did not grow up with Transformers. I didn't really watch a lot of the original cartoons, but I have seen, you know, some of the original cartoons. You know, I've seen the original 86 film. I think it's super fun. And, you know, the Bay movies, outside, the first ones, it's okay. The rest are all garbage. I really love Bumblebee. Travis Knight came in there. He did a great job. But this is by far the best one. I think it's a love letter to classic G1 Transformers. It treats the material with respect. It's very mature, and and it looks really good. Like, if I have a criticism, there's some humor that doesn't work. But again, what I may not find funny, you may find funny, you know, or vice versa. But at the center of it, the thing that makes this movie work as well as it does is the relationship between the characters who will one day be Optimus Prime and Megatron. You see how they're a family. Like, they are brothers. They are incredibly close friends. They are all that they have. And throughout them, and you know, going into this, whether you're a Transformers fan or not, you know that they will eventually become the worst of enemies, mortal enemies. And the movie shows you over time how that comes to be. And in the third act, there's a moment where it's the inciting moment. And I was like, can they nail this? And they do. They absolutely nail. And those who have seen the movie know exactly what that scene is. And it's great. It's great. I would love more entries in this version of Transformers. I would love sequels. But I don't know if we're going to get them. I'm not sure. But at the very least, we have this movie, which is going to become a cult classic. I really enjoy this. For the longest time, this was on my best of list. It just got kicked out. But very high honorable mention. Very, very high. This would be like my number 11 or maybe like number 12, personally. And my last honorable mention that I want to mention is Wicked, which is directed by John M. Chu. I guess it's called Wicked Part 1. And this is an adaptation of the stage musical, which was an adaptation of the Wicked book, which came out in the 90s. And this is a kind of like alternate version of Oz, where the Wicked Witch, she is not as wicked as we have come to know and learn. Actually, is because of this, you know, political societal structure in place, and just the resentment towards her because she's green and because she looks different from everyone else. And, you know, listen, we get a lot of these types of movies, you know, where it's like, oh, the villain's not really the villain. They're actually the hero of the story. And to be quite honest, I'm kind of sick of them. However, this movie does a good job with that concept. Because thankfully, the movie is great. I think you have a wonderful story. You have great performances throughout, with Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba, who then becomes the Wicked Witch. The person who really stood out to me was Ariana Grande as Glinda at first, and then she changes to Glinda. Her performance in this, I had some misgivings. I'm like, I only seen her like in one other thing before, like Don't Look Up, when she had like a very small kind of cameo role. She holds her own in this movie, and she has some great comedic timing. I found her very, very funny. But then you have other people that I think do a great job of their, you know, song and dance numbers. Jonathan Bailey, I think, is really good. Peter Dinklage, he plays a goat. He plays a goat. He does a great job. Michelle Yeoh, I think, is excellent in the movie. Jeff Goldblum is perfectly cast as the Wizard of Oz. And the film just, yeah, it has a lot of great musical numbers. Has a nice aesthetic. You know, a lot of wonderful looking sets. And yeah, and the music is incredible. Like the defying, I mean, there's great songs throughout the entire film. I don't think there's a single bad song. But like Defying Gravity, like I saw that with my girlfriend. And when that song, when Cynthia Erivo was doing, like doing all that, she like grabbed me. I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? It scared the hell out of me. And she said, I'm just really excited. This movie's awesome. Like, I'm glad you love it. I'm glad you love it. And I loved it too. I thought it was great. It makes me excited for the second part, which I guess they announced it's going to be called not Wicked Part 2. It's going to be called Wicked for Good. So we shall see. But yeah, I really enjoyed Wicked, and it was on my best of list for a little while. But I just, I saw some other films that kicked it off. However, all my honorable mentions are movies that I encourage you guys to check out. I think they're really, really fun. But now, my friends, moving on to my top 10 best movies of 2024. We are starting with number 10. And number 10 is Anora, a movie I have seen very, very recently. Matter of fact, I saw it this week, reviewed it this week. And this is a comedy drama film, directed, written, edited. He also provided craft services, I'm sure, by Sean Baker, who's done some other cool dramas in the past. Red Rocket, most recently. Florida Project, which is the last film of his that I saw that I really, really enjoyed. But Anora, this film focuses on the character Anora, or Annie, as she prefers to be called, played by Mikey Madison. And she is a stripper and escort. And she gets into, initially, just, is paid for by a client at the club that she works for, a young son of a Russian oligarch, and they begin to hang out and spend a lot of time with each other for many days. Then turns into like a very, very long week, and they decide to get married in Vegas because they feel like they have a lot in common. They really enjoy each other's company. However, this young Russian's family comes to learn of this marriage, which then causes many hijinks to ensue, and the family and people hired by the family attempt to annul the marriage between Anora and her husband, Ivan, or Vanya. However, in the film, Vanya goes off, he runs away, and goes on a bender, and so Anora is pretty much forced to accompany these henchmen hired by Vanya's family to try and find him throughout the entire film. And yeah, this is a great dramedy. It's really smartly written. It's shot very well. You have great performances throughout, like Mikey Madison. Of course, you've seen Mikey Madison before, mostly getting set on fire and things. She was set on fire in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then she was set on fire in Scream 5. Here, she's not set on fire. She's on fire in the movie. Not literally, figuratively. She does a great job, both with the physical aspects of her performance, playing an escort, playing a stripper, and all that. But no, I mean, she has so much heart. She's such a fun, sassy, intelligent character. She holds her own. She's very worldly. She has these moments where she has to be, very tough and strong, obviously, but she has these moments of emotion and sensitivity and realization as she comes to learn what a relationship is to this guy that she's only known for however long. She's wonderful in the film. And you have a really good supporting cast in this movie. Some familiar people that have worked with Sean Baker before. The one supporting performance that really stood out to me, aside from Mikey Madison, was Yura Borisov, which I don't know if I've seen anything else. He plays the character Igor, who is kind of the sensitive henchman hired to deal with this situation. And at first you kind of think he's one thing, but as you see throughout the entire film, he's the character with the common sense. He's the calm one, because a lot of people are at 11. There's a lot of screaming in this movie. And for good reason. But he's the one that you need to kind of grasp onto to kind of make sense of this and kind of acclimate you to the story and what's going on. I really liked his more calmer, sensitive performance throughout the film. Yeah, and Anora is a great movie. If you're a fan of Sean Baker's other films, I think you're gonna really like this. And if you just kind of want to see a darker version of Pretty Woman. I think you're going to get a kick out of this movie. But moving on from my 10th best movie of 2024, let's get to number 9. At 9, I have Heretic, which is a horror film, an A24 horror film, directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, probably best known for being the writers behind the original A Quiet Place. And they went on to do 65, which I kind of liked, but a lot of people did not. Thankfully, Heretic, this is more on the level of A Quiet Place. The film stars Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, who play these two Mormon missionaries who are attempting to convert this very reclusive man and historian played by Hugh Grant. But they come to realize he's not as seemingly ordinary as he appears to be, and they are in a very dangerous situation. Like, I am a big fan of horror films, as you guys know. I actually have several other horror films on my list. But, like, this movie just does a great job of creating tension through conversation. Like, conversations about theology, faith, religion, the inconsistencies of all these things, of culture, of society, the wonderful back and forth between essentially just three characters that we follow in this film. There's like a couple other like tertiary people that pop up for like a minute or two, but it's pretty much just these three people in this house together. And it just continues to escalate throughout. And you get deeper into it. It gets more disturbing and weirder, but it always remains entertaining. It's like, I love how they use so little. It's a very minimalist movie, but because of the writing, because of the use of lighting and the environments, on how they choose to present them. The cinematography is actually like really good. It's not like super flashy cinematography, but it does a great job of setting up the atmosphere and making you feel uncomfortable or really, really tense. And Thatcher and East, I think, are great in the film. They bounce off each other really well. But I'd be lying. My favorite performance in this movie absolutely is Hugh Grant. I mean, he brings some of those kind of Hugh Grant isms, the affableness, the charm, but underneath that is just a layer of like disturbing menace. That's what's underneath this character, like underneath those glasses. And I really like that. And he like does such a great job of being so charismatic that you want to believe him, but is what he's actually saying like a lie, or is it, a manipulation, or is it the truth? And I love that with his character. I think he just did a fantastic job in the film. But moving on from number 9, and number 8, Chad, and number 8, I have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. The fourth entry in the Planet of the Apes franchise. I mean, a lot of us were wondering if we're going to get any more entries in the modern Apes, series. Of course, all started with Rise, which was a great movie. And then, of course, followed by Dawn, which is my favorite entry in the franchise. And then War, that's when Matt Reeves took it over. Matt Reeves doesn't return to direct. Instead, we have Wes Ball directing this. And Wes Ball is probably best known for directing the Maze Runner films. I haven't seen all of them. I saw the first one. It's pretty solid. But I think a lot of us were like kind of worried. It's like, how are you going to capture that magic? And the Apes trilogy is like one of the best modern trilogies of all time. Like each film is like really, really good. Although I think we all have our individual favorites. But he does a great job with this, him and his fellow filmmakers and writers and collaborators. I think it was just so smart to have this movie take place centuries after the events of the first 3 films, centuries after Caesar, where, in those movies, like human society is kind of on the brink of extinction due to this virus that gave the apes their intelligence and the means to create their own society and societies. And, Caesar leading, his own ape colony and having Caesar's teachings proliferate across the world, at the very least, the continent of the United States, and having other ape societies who did not know about Caesar take his teachings and warp them for their own benefit is fascinating. It's just like with religion. It's just like with all these religious figures. Now people take them, all these stories, all these legends, all these myths, and they change certain things like over time to suit their own needs. And the movie's world building is great. It has a wonderful look. The CGI in the apes has never looked better. And you're introduced to a lot of like great new characters, like Owen Teague, who plays Noah, who's very different from Caesar. He's like this young chimpanzee hunter who wants to, goes on this journey to rescue his family, to become, a leader. But he struggles. He's not the strongest ape out there. He has to approach situations differently. We come to meet this human, a May, and it's not like the human relationships that Caesar has had in the past films, where most of them were very kind of like of James Franco or like the human characters he comes to meet in Dawn. This one is more antagonistic, and you see like just the effects that the virus has had on humans for all these centuries. And how desperate it's gotten. And you just have a wonderful performance by Kevin Durant as Proximus Caesar, who is one of those apes who has taken Caesar's teaching, basically has proclaimed Caesar, basically proclaimed himself Caesar, and is forcing like all these different practices so he can just enrich himself and make himself more powerful. But it's by bastardizing Caesar's philosophy and teachings. And I just really like it. It's a very smart science fiction thriller. And we're going to get another one, so I can't wait to see where the story is going to go. But, this is pretty incredible. We're getting like 4 great movies in this series, in this Modern Apes trilogy, or Modern Apes series now. I loved it. But moving on to number 7, a recent entry. Number 7, I have Strange Darling, which I reviewed just yesterday. And I like I said during that review, I don't want to say too much about this movie. It's directed by J.T. Mulner and stars Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner. And the film, it takes place in rural Oregon, and it focuses on a man and a woman. The man is called the Demon, and this woman is being pursued by him. And the film is divided into like 6 chapters, but they're told in non-linear order. I think like the movie starts with chapter 3, then it goes back to then it goes to chapter 4, and then it goes to like chapter 1, and then we go to like chapter 6, and it does all that. And that's to create this sense of mystery and tension. And this movie is filled with twists and turns. And that's why I don't want to say too much, because I want you guys to experience this for yourself. But it's one of the smartest horror thrillers that I've seen this year, and it's anchored by 2 really good performances. Kyle Gallner, which you've probably seen him in other things before. He's always been a solid actor. He was the male lead in Smile 2. He's popped up in some other things. This is, I think, his best performance of his career. And Willa Fitzgerald, who I previously saw in Fall of the House of Usher, she played a young Madeline Usher. This role of hers is great. I think she just does a fantastic job. And also the cinematography, the use of color in movies, really good. How they play with reds and things and like black and white. And funny enough, the cinematography is done by Giovanni Ribisi, who I didn't know was a cinematographer or had experience of that. But his cinematography is excellent. I want to see him do more movies, shoot more movies like this. But yeah, Strange Darling was a big surprise for me. I really, really enjoyed it. And at number 6, playing kind of like my bottom 5 here. At number 6, I have DreamWorks' The Wild Robot. I remember when we saw this trailer like months ago, which the whole concept being we're following this robot who crash lands in the wild on this isolated island filled with, all sorts of vegetation, flora and fauna, and a lot of the fauna doesn't want it there. But I remember just seeing this trailer, I'm getting like, oh yeah, this is gonna make us all cry. And that's what the movie did. It made us all cry, where this robot, who originally was going to be shipped to this other location where human society exists, crash lands here, and they're trying just to kind of find a purpose. Along the way, after an accident, they are then responsible for taking care of this little gosling, preparing it for migration while also befriending various animals, throughout its parenthood of this little goose. And it's incredibly charming, and the animation is gorgeous. It's beautiful. The color palette. It's one of the prettiest movies that I've seen this year. It's very similar to the aesthetics and artwork of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which I just wish DreamWorks, like, this is going to be our new animation style, because it kind of stands out. It's It's not exact, but it clearly takes inspiration from art styles that we've seen in like the Spider-Verse movies or Mitchell's versus the Machines, TMNT, Mutant Mayhem, similar to that. But I love it. I haven't gotten sick of this look. It kind of looks like a storybook, which I know it's an adaptation of a children's book. But just so much of it does look like a storybook, and I really loved it. And great voice performances throughout. Like Lupita Nyong'o, who plays the robot, Roz, she does a great job. Pedro Pascal plays this fox. He's really good. Kit Connor plays the Bright Bill, the basically the child of Roz in this movie. But then you also have Bill Nighy in this, Stephanie Hugh, Mark Hamill, Catherine O'Hara. Matt Berry plays as a sassy British beaver. Ving Rhames is a very courageous hawk in the film. It's just great. It's just great. Like, we've gotten some really good animated films, some bad animated films, but this one just stood out. Like, I'm constantly going back and forth between this movie and another one I have in my best of list. But I can totally understand people saying, like, this is the best animated movie of the year. If I have any criticism, but I don't have any criticisms of it, it is a familiar story. Of the parent, like this character who then becomes a parent, even though they don't want to become a parent, but then they turn out to be a great parent, raising this kid. Like, we've seen this before, but it's DreamWorks does a great job with it, 100%. And I could see a lot of people saying this is the best animated movie of the year, and I couldn't argue with you because it's great. It made me cry. I cried, I think, twice watching this movie, if not 3 times. But yeah, Wild Robot, excellent film at number 6. And now, Chad, we're getting to the top five best movies of 2024. And it's a film I saw last night. At number 5, I have Hundreds of Beavers. Now, I'll admit, like, I saw the trailer for this. I thought, like, oh, that looks quaint. That looks cute, weird. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fun. It'll be a fun little thing. I didn't expect to love this movie as much as I did, but I absolutely do. As I said in my review that I just did not too long ago, this is directed by Mike Cheslick and also written by him and his partner Ryland Brixton Colt Hughes, who is the main lead of this film. And this movie is a black and white film that's inspired by the 1920s and 1930s movies of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, along with classic Looney Tunes shorts and cartoons featuring Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and also incorporating elements of various video games, everything from classic 2D and 3D platformers like Mario or adventure games like Zelda, or even like survival video games like Don't Starve and Minecraft. And all of that just mixes together to create just one of the most unique viewing experiences that I've had this year. I love the look of this movie. The humor, the sight gags, the physical comedy is great. I was laughing so much watching this film. The physical performances of all of the actors was great across the board. The stuff they do with the animals, which are just people like wearing these goofy costumes, dressed as rabbits and raccoons, wolves, and beavers, hundreds of beavers. It just so works. And it just surprised me at several points. Like the first part of the movie is kind of like a tutorial of the video game, and like the credits don't come in until like a half hour into the movie. It's like, oh, now the movie starts. It's like, what? And then the title doesn't come in until like the last 40 minutes. It's crazy. And it has like all these tonal shifts. It goes from like really wacky and goofy to kind of like dark, still goofy, but kind of really dark and sometimes more. But I love that. It reminded me of those Looney Tunes cartoons I used to watch, which were dark, which did get a little mean-spirited, which were incredibly politically incorrect. And it's a movie that's familiar with its aesthetics, but it's aesthetics that we just haven't seen for a very long time. And I just ended up just being blown away by this. Really, really love this movie. And moving on from number 5, here we go, top 4. And number 4 I have, and this doesn't come as a surprise. Number 4 I have Inside Out 2, of course the sequel to Inside Out. And this film focuses on the emotions who have been guiding, Riley throughout her childhood. And now Riley, she's going to be a teenager, but, with her age increasing, with her being a teenager, that also means there's going to be new emotions she's going to have to deal with on a daily basis, and how the other emotions are going to have to deal with them on a daily basis. And we're introduced to, emotions like embarrassment, boredom, ennui, envy, and of course, anxiety. Now, I was already like a really big fan of Inside Out 2. I think it was just a really cool idea to personify emotions, and how would like the inside of a person's brain work with these things. It was a very creative idea, and it was so successful. And it was the kind of movie where it's like, this could be a one-off, but at the same time, even kind of at the end, they leave it open like, well, there could be like possibilities. Like what if Riley was a little girl, like what's she going to go through when she's going through puberty, when she's a teenager? Like there's a lot of material there that you can mine. And they do just that in this film where, Riley is dealing with these new emotions, especially with anxiety. Like how they handle anxiety, who's voiced by Maya Hawke, is great. Like Pixar animate an anxiety attack, and it's pitch perfect. That's exactly how it goes. It's so emotional. There's several times which I definitely cried watching this movie. A lot of the other emotions get more to do. So like, Lewis Black, his anger gets more to do. There's some other supporting characters and gags in this film that are just so funny that I don't want to spoil stuff from things from childhood, the cartoons from childhood that we watched, the things that are similar to something like Dora the Explorer or like Final Fantasy video games. There's just so many unexpected things that they just did not include in the marketing, the trailers for this, that I came to just really, really love while watching it, and were very funny. But it's again, like Pixar at its best has that emotional core that you can attach to no matter what your age is, no matter what your demographic is or culture. It's just these common things we all experience as humans, and we all experience all of these emotions. We all experience anxiety, and how they are able to showcase that throughout this film, I think, is great. And I was going back in my mind to like Inside Out 2, Wild Robot. And, I think I would just give the edge to Inside Out 2 just because the story is a little more unique than Wild Robot. And again, I'm not like dismissing Wild Robot. It's a wonderful film. It's in my top 10. But I just liked how they showcase these new emotions, especially anxiety. I thought it was a great movie, one of Pixar's best in the last few years. Probably since like Coco and Toy Story 4. But here we go, chat, at the top three best movies of 2024. And at number 3, I have Late Night with the Devil, which is a supernatural horror film written, directed, edited. And I'm sure they also made the craft services as well, Colin and Cameron Cairns. And it stars David Dastmalchian, who, listen, if you don't recognize the name, you certainly recognize the face. You've seen this guy pop up in supporting roles for, at this point, for 15 years now, if not longer. As that crazy henchman in The Dark Knight who just stood out, Harvey Dent was like intimidating him. Wendy's commercials. He's in the Suicide Squad. He's in the Ant-Man movies. He's in a ton of horror films, a lot of Denis Villeneuve movies like Dune, like Blade Runner 2049. You've seen this guy. He's a ton of TV shows. And he's always like consistently like really, really good. Like we're all like, yeah, David Dastmalchian. He's a great actor. This is the first time where he's a leading man and he knocks it out of the park. Like the film, it incorporates found footage and documentary filmmaking, and then follows this late night talk show host, who played by David Dastmalchian, who has this show called Night Owls, and is like always second the ratings to Johnny Carson. And this is like the last, even though his show has been successful, it's not getting the numbers that it needs. And so in order to increase his ratings, to become more successful, he's airing this very special Halloween episode in 1977, right? And he's bringing on an allegedly possessed girl onto the show who has been possessed by an entity, probably the devil. And throughout the movie, first of all, just the look of the film, they perfectly capture the look of those classic, like Johnny Carson 1970s talk show hosts. It's just great. And David Dastmalchian feels like like a Johnny Carson through and through. The costumes are wonderful. The aesthetic of the movie is great. Like they have it where like the film quality matches kind of the graininess that we see in those kind of classic CRT TVs and things. And it's interspliced with some behind the scenes documentary black and white footage when we're not like watching the late night talk show. But then like all the creepy stuff that they put in there, it has kind of like a bit of a campy feel at times. I think that's intentional, kind of match the setting. But they just do a great job of layering in this mystery, creating some really spooky and gross, terrifying scenes. Like the last third of this movie, it really goes off where you see like this body horror and worms and people's heads, splitting open. It gets nuts. But David Dastmalchian's performance like just really made the movie for me. I just really enjoyed him. It's one of my favorite acting performances this year. And it's just a unique horror film. That we don't see it. Like, I don't know. I can't think of anything else a horror movie we're going to have this take place on a 1970s talk show. I don't know if there's anything else like that. So I appreciated that it did something really different. And they just executed it very well. So, yeah, Late Night of the Devil, number 3 for me. And moving on, Chet, my top 2. I think you can probably guess what the top 2 are now. But at number 2, I have Bobby Eggers' Nosferatu. So I've been a huge Robert Eggers fan for years. I really enjoyed The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. That's still my favorite Robert Eggers movie. And I love The Northman. Very underappreciated film. But Nosferatu, it just continues to prove that Robert Eggers doesn't miss. This is his remake of the unsanctioned 1922 adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which they named Nosferatu. Now that movie, I forgot the Stoker estate. The Bram Stoker estate, they ordered that the copies of that movie be destroyed, but some copies survived, and, it's become an incredibly influential, not just horror film, but just piece of cinema in general. And we have had other adaptations of Nosferatu over the years, other remakes, if you will, one from the 70s, of course, and but this is Robert Eggers' vision. And Robert Eggers, he's just a master when it comes to telling these dark folk tales. Like, he just brings in such a level of craftsmanship that you feel completely immersed in these worlds. Whether it be in, 1630s colonial America, whether it be, off the coast of New England in the 1890s, or in the, 800 AD or something like that, following this, Viking band, this man seeking vengeance. He does the same here with Nosferatu, setting this in the 1830s in Germany. Again, very much taking from the original Bram Stoker Dracula story, where you follow this real estate agent played by Nicholas Hoult, who is married to to Lily Rose Depp's character, who has had these visions, these episodes of basically a walking corpse, being in love with her, infatuated with her, stooping her every night. He goes to Transylvania and comes to meet, Count Orlok, who is indeed the thing that has been messing with and lusting for Lily Rose Depp's character for all this time. And then eventually venturing to Germany and causing all these horrible things to happen. The performances across the board, from Nicholas Hoult and Lily Rose Depp, who I originally had some misgivings about, but I think she gives a fantastic performance in this movie. They're great as the Hunter couple. Aaron Taylor Johnson, he shakes off some of the grossness from Kraven the Hunter. He delivers a really great performance. Emma Corrin is great as Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife in the film. Ralph Ineson, who, again, you may not recognize name, but you've certainly seen the face, and you will most definitely recognize the voice, who returns to work with Eggers. He previously played the father in The Witch. He's great, and this is a doctor. Willem Dafoe is a vampire hunter, chat. I mean, if that doesn't sell you, I don't know what will. He's great in the movie. He has some of the best lines in the film that are very, very funny. He's like before I even saw like a trailer for this film, there was like some press images released from the movie, and my favorite one was just Willem Dafoe in this ancient-looking crypt or mausoleum, surrounded by like hundreds of rats, flames encircling him, just going, just laughing like the Green Goblin. It's perfect. And of course, you have you have Bill Skarsgård, who is one of 17 Skarsgård children. Like, and they're like Stella and his wife. They did a great job, produced some very talented kids. Alexander Skarsgård, obviously, and Bill's talented as well. But he's the Skarsgård they took out of the vat a little too early. You know, he's gangly, he's weird looking, he's walled-eyed and things, but that has served him well. It really has. Whether it be playing a cosmic sewer clown or a lustful undead vampire lord, he nails it. And he is great as Count Orlok. I love his voice. I love the look. He has, as the kids say, he has the riz. Because every lady in this, every broad, is just lusting for Count Orlok and that undead schlong hanging between those rotting thighs. He's really, really good in the movie. And again, I've mentioned aesthetic a lot throughout this best of, but the aesthetic of this movie is beautiful. The sets are great. The on-location shooting is the lighting is perfect. How they play up the shadows. There are moments, and the cinematography is gorgeous. There are moments in this movie where it feels like it's black and white, and clearly that is Robert Eggers' homage to the original 1922 film. It's a great horror movie, a great movie in general, and just continues to prove that Robert Eggers is one of the most talented, one of the most underrated filmmakers working right now. But chat, we have to move on to my number one. And I think you guys can guess what it is, chat. At number one, the best movie, the best movie of 2024 is The Substance. For those of you that don't know, I love body horror. You know, I love movies. Like you can probably see some of these posters in my room right now. Like one of my favorite movies of all time is John Carpenter's The Thing. I love David Cronenberg's The Fly, the 86 Fly. You know, I love Ridley Scott's Alien that incorporate elements of body. There's just something about that just gets to me. You know, it's like, listen, there's plenty of horror movies I love. I love slashers. I love, sci-fi horror, of course, psychological thrillers. But there's just something, the idea of your own body, like something within you rebelling against you, like you can't control that. It just gets to me in a great way. Like it scares me, legitimately scares me, but it enthralls me and just interests me. And there's just so many unique things you can do with that. And that's on full display in this movie, in The Substance. A horror film written, directed, edited, produced, and I'm sure she provided the craft services to Corley Fargi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I'll get it right one day. But she has delivered a body horror masterpiece. One of the best horror films of the 2020s so far. And we've gotten a lot of great horror movies in the 20s, a lot of great horror movies this year, but this is my favorite one. This is one of the movies that I'm going to think back throughout this decade and say, like, this one. This is just one of my favorite films. For those that don't know, it stars Demi Moore as this character called Elizabeth Sparkle, who is this aging and kind of fading celebrity. She's fired from her aerobics TV show by her producer, played wonderfully by Dennis Quaid. Listen, Dennis Quaid, he's had a lot of different roles across his career. He's good in some things, bad in some things. Some of the movies that he's done are crazy. Some good, some bad. I love him in The Intruder. Here, he's at 11, and he is having so much fun. He is relishing playing this. Some of the first body horror moments in this movie are with him. Before we get to the really, truly, like, disgusting, grotesque stuff, like, our introduction to him is coming into a bathroom, and we're, like, right up in his face. We can see his pores and just in the oil of his skin, and him trying to pee, but he can't do it, probably because he has some venereal disease or something. He's just struggling, like, just the whole time. Later on, we see him eat shrimp and shellfish and copious amounts of butter, and it's disgusting, but it's wonderful. It's beautiful. And then later on, with Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth Sparkle, after she's fired from her show, she starts, and she's aging, after an accident that she's involved in, she learns about this black market drug that creates, once injected into yourself, called The Substance, it creates a much younger version of herself. And this much younger version of herself is played by Margaret Qualley. However, they have to have an understanding. There has to be a balance. You are one, and they don't have an understanding throughout the film, and that has some unexpected and horrific side effects. And once we get to a lot of the body horror in the movie, the practical effects, the makeup, everything they do with that is great. And Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley's commitment to all those scenes that involve all that is incredible. I think this is, Margaret Qualley, who's been appearing in stuff for years, and, this is another great role for her, but this is like Demi Moore. I think this is her best role. And I'm trying to think of the last movie that I saw with her where it's wow, she really stood out. And the one that always comes to mind is G.I. Jane, which she's very good in. But I think this is the best role of her entire career. And I think the reason why she took this role is because of her own experiences throughout her life. Because, people don't know, there was the famous, the infamous, shoot. I think I forget the mag. I think it was Max. I forget what magazine it was for, but it was or Vanity Fair or something. But it was the shoot where she was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and showing off her body, her pregnant curves, and that freaked everybody out, right? And that's what the other part of this movie is about. It's about how it's celebritydom. About celebrity and how you're treated, and how women in particular are continuously judged over their appearances, exploited, and once they start aging, they're just kind of thrown away. And it's dealing with, self-loathing and self-harm. And that's what we see so many of these characters, particularly Demi Moore's character, go through in this movie while horrifically transforming along the way. It culminates in a third act that is wild. That is as if John Carpenter, Sam Raimi, David Cronenberg, and Wes Craven just came together to help Corley Farkey direct it. Be just go balls to the wall at 11. It is a crazy, ridiculous spectacle, and I loved it, and it earned it. But yeah, The Substance, it's to me, it's a horror masterpiece. I have no criticism of this movie. The soundtrack and the score is great. All the technical aspects across the board are wonderful. And if you love some goop, if you love some monster makeup, again, if you love body horror, this movie has. You love ass. This movie, the thing is, this movie has so much nudity in it. It has so much ass and so much boob. Eventually, be it's too much. Take it back. It's too much boob. You have a moment in the film where someone vomits up a boob. That's how much boob and ass is in this. And God bless it. I'm so glad that The Substance had so much boob and ass, because even though you think you're gonna like that, eventually you won't. And you have to thank The Substance for that. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty incredible. Yeah, so my best movie of 2024 is The Substance. But I think any of the films I mentioned, my top 10 honorable mentions, I recommend checking out. I think they're all great in various ways and are really entertaining. And I guess last minute, just off the top of my head, some other movies that I had maybe were on my 2024 best of list, but kind of got kicked out, but are still really entertaining and still really fun and good. I also recommend checking out Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, directed by Adam Wingard. It's very much they've embraced the Showa sensibilities, those kind of Godzilla films from the 60s and 70s. It's just a smorgasbord of monster fights, of color, of humor and wackiness. It's a fun film. I really like the Neolithic horror movie Out of Darkness, where you follow this kind of small group of Homo sapiens as they're kind of go to a new environment, and they come upon this terror that's kind of picking them off one by one. Really cool, interesting film. Longlegs, directed by Osgood Perkins, is a really fun and nasty horror thriller with great performances by Micah Monroe and a zany performance by Nicolas Cage. I recommend that one. Love Lies Bleeding was a really good dramatic thriller earlier from this year. Great performance by Kristen Stewart. And I forget the actress who was her co-lead. Let me look that up right now because she's been popping a ton of stuff. Let me give a shout out. She actually gave my favorite performance in the movie. Katie M. O'Brien. She was also really good with a great supporting performance by Ed Harris and Anya Barishkinov. And also Dave Franco just being really scummy. And I guess one last shout out to Smile 2. Smile 2, which of course is the sequel to the first Smile, with many of the original filmmakers, collaborators returning for that. It's like, I don't know if it quite beats the original Smile for me. It doesn't do like enough new, but it does everything so well. And I guess there are some scenes that feel a little bit bigger in scale, and it sets up a really cool idea and premise for the third movie, which I'm sure they're going to do because Smile 2 was a critical and commercial success, and a really great performance by Naomi Scott. Like, I've always liked Naomi Scott. I liked her all the way back in Power Rangers. She did a great job. And a lot of the other things that she's appeared in, she's usually been like one of the standouts, and even if the movie might be particularly good, liked her. Here, she gives a hell of a performance that I think is worthy of award attention. But yeah, I just wanted to mention those other ones. But yeah, just to reiterate, chat, my top 10 again, starting with number 10, I have Anora. At number 9, I have The Heretic. At number 8, I have Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. At number 7, I have Strange Darling. At number 6, I have The Wild Robot. At number 5, I have Hundreds of Beavers. At number 4, I have Inside Out 2. At number 3, I have Late Night with the Devil. And at number 2, I have Nosferatu. And at number 1, The Substance. And of course, you can check out my honorable mentions and some of the other ones I just mentioned right there. But what about you guys out there? I'm very curious. What were some of your favorite movies? What are the best movies of 2024 for you? Let me know. First of all, did you like the movies that I suggested? Did you like my list? Did you not like them? Or did you downright hate them? You're like, Chris, I didn't like any of these movies. All these movies are bad. Maybe you thought all these movies are good. Let me know.